How's it going, everyone? It's Star Blue, and I'm here with a ranking video today. This one will be covering all of the Operation Story Mode bosses in Star Wars The Old Republic. I will be analyzing each one by difficulty and assigning a score from 1 to 5, with 1 being the easiest and 5 being the hardest. Please keep in mind this is opinion based, so your list may be different than mine, and if so, please let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, if you like this list, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. So without further ado, let's get started. Eternity Vault, or EV, is one of the easiest operations in the game, and the first boss, the Annihilation Droid, is one of the easiest bosses. It is primarily a tank and spank encounter with the occasional turn up for healing. Overall score, 1. Guards is a step up in difficulty, with tanks needing to position him away from the rest of the raid and all players moving from one platform to the next, assuming the fight doesn't bug out. The pounces hurt pretty hard as well, but the fight's not too difficult mechanically. Overall score, 2. The Ancient Pylons are a pair of puzzle apples that need to be turned to open the main vault in EV. The enemies between turns are mostly trivial to face against, and most of the challenge involves turning the dials. Overall score, 1. The Infernal Council is a set of 8 individual encounters, or 16 and 16 man, in which every player must fight one of the bosses within. As long as no one accidentally assists another player before their assigned boss is defeated, the fight goes pretty smoothly. Overall score, 1. SWTOR is the last boss of the operation, and the only one in an Eternity Vault where healers need to be on point, particularly on the falling platforms between phases. Mechanics are more involved in this encounter, and tanks must be aware of their surroundings in the last phase. Overall score, 2. Moving on from EV, we now go to Karagga's Palace, the first operation in the Dreadmaster story arc. The first boss, Bone Thrasher, has no aggro table and cannot be tanked traditionally. In addition, the ads need to die quickly lest they buff the boss. Overall score, 2. Jarg and Sorno are a pair of bounty hunters that are mostly tank and spank, with the occasional ad freezing one of the tanks. Not much to say here. Overall score, 1. Foreman Crusher is one of the most straightforward fights in the game. Other than ads and a mild tank check, there's nothing to write home about on this boss. Overall score, 1. The Fabricator used to be more challenging in story mode, but the puzzle has been relegated to hard mode. This is also the first boss that, if the tanks are under-geared, requires a tank swap. Still a relatively easy fight, but can be a little challenging for new groups. Overall score, 2. Karagga himself serves as the last boss, and along with Fabricator, is a tank-heavy fight. Karagga needs to be kited around the arena while everyone else stands on his side. Other than the tank's job, this fight is pretty straightforward. Overall score, 1. Explosive Conflict, or EC, is a step up from the first 2 operations, and is arguably the hardest one in the Dreadmaster story arc. Over the years, the fights have been nerfed so they are more approachable, but there are still mechanics that can kill players if not done correctly. Zorn and Toth, the Drooks at the beginning, used to be much harder in story mode, but they still pack a punch with their AoEs and the fact they need to die around the same time. Overall score, 2. Firebrand and Stormcaller are another duo boss that have a significant number of mechanics that can wipe a group easily, and they require more coordination from both the tanks and the healers. DPS checks are also a thing with the ads. Overall score, 3. Colonel Vorgath requires a player in the tower to navigate a path for the rest of the raid to travel through a deadly minefield in order to reach him on the other side. Though the more difficult mechanics of crossing are safe for hard mode and nightmare, it still takes quite a bit of effort to make it through. Overall score, 2. The last boss, Kefis, has several mini phases before the guy himself jumps out. All of these can be intimidating for newcomers, and they require the raid to be on their toes when going from one mechanic to the next. Overall score, 3. With the conflict on Nova quelled, the next operation is Terror from Beyond, or TFB for short. The first boss is significantly easier than anything in EC and is primarily a tank and spank encounter on story mode. Overall score, 1. The Dread Guards require a little more coordination and a little more brainpower from DPS, especially since Doom is an instant death mechanic if not done properly. However, most groups can easily defeat them in one go. Overall score, 2. Operator 9 is a boss that requires quite a bit of coordination even in story mode. All 8 players need to be aware of their surroundings and know when it is their turn to click panels or stand in the middle. There are also quite a few DPS checks. Overall score, 3. Kefis is a lot easier, arguably too easy now, with the story mode nerfs given to him. Phase 1 is purely tank and spank, while Phase 2 requires careful tank positioning and people cleansing nanites. Overall score, 1. The Terror himself is a long fight, even in story mode. With 2 distinct phases, the fight tests DPS coordination and attacks as the healers too. The fight is tough, but manageable. Overall score, 3. With the Terror sealed away, we move on to the longest operation, Scum Villainy. Dash Rude, the beast at the beginning, is mostly a tank and spank encounter, and the intended mechanics of crossing the desert can be ignored in story mode. The only tough part is if someone gets lost. Overall score 1. Titan 6 is a somewhat humorous encounter with a few adds and a little bit of splash damage to mitigate through. The burn phase can be a literal burn if the team's not careful though, but it's still pretty easy. Overall score 1. Thrasher, not to be confused with the Rancor from earlier, hits pretty hard and the adds in the corners are a bit of a nuisance. However, it's still on the easy side. Overall score 2. The fourth encounter, the Operations Chief in Oasis City, is a rather unique fight, albeit dumbed down in story mode where the raid doesn't need to split up anymore. However, this nerf trivializes the fight, so it's glorified trash and a take and spank encounter now. Overall score 1. Olaf the Shadow is a little bit more challenging and the fight goes on for a while. Based on the board setup, this can be a cakewalk or a nightmare overwhelming everyone. As long as players buy the right droids, it's pretty doable. Overall score 2. The Cartel Warlords are an unexpected spike in difficulty compared to the previous bosses. I've seen several story mode groups wipe multiple times because Thunder wasn't kited properly or the healing wasn't up to par. This is one of the few fights outside of odds or R4 that most groups struggle with. Overall score 4. At last, we face off against one of the 6 Dreadmasters. Styrak, despite being the low man on the totem pole in their group, is no pushover. The fight has multiple DPS checks, and the Kel Dragon can hurt quite a bit, even in story mode. Overall score 3. Now that one of the Dreadmasters has fallen, it's time to face off against the others, and where else to do that than on their homeworld of Oricon. The gauntlet starts with their gatekeeper Nephra, who will attempt to bar the ops team's way, but she doesn't do a very good job of it. Her fight's a dummy parse with the occasional exploding droid. Overall score 1. Traxxas, the Gate Commander, will throw waves upon waves of adds at everyone. Nothing to write home about here in story mode. Overall score 1. Grobthok, a mutated Rancor, serves as the third boss, and like the first two, is fairly trivial for everyone except the tank. The tank must kite it over to a magnet to prevent it from using Pipe Smash. Overall score 1. Corruptor Zero, like Draxus, is a fight loaded with adds and the occasional chest laser. Damage is a little tighter here, so good healing and add management are essential. Overall score 2. After traveling through the fortress, the ops team faces off against the second of the Dreadmasters. Branis, like Styrak before her, is a step up in difficulty with DPS checks and strict healing requirements, particularly during the second transition and the last phase. Overall score 3. The Dread Palace is where players face off against the other 4 masters, starting with Bestia. The Bestia fight is loaded with abominable monsters and shrilling screams that can hurt quite a bit. However, the fight is still fairly manageable. Overall score 2. Tyrant's acts as one of the puzzle bosses here, and he requires a bit of coordination from the team to prevent being cornered over a death pit. Inferno can also be a nuisance if not positioned correctly. Overall score 2. The Calpheus fight involves time travel and requires a small amount of communication between the past and future teams in the second phase. Failure to inform the past group which crystal to destroy is the cause of many wipes. Overall score 3. Raptus, the last of the masters, provides a bit of a challenge, no pun intended. As long as all 3 roles complete their assigned challenges twice, this fight is rather simple, other than a few issues with tank placement that can eat an unassuming tank off the arena. Overall score 2. With all 6 Dreadmasters supposedly defeated, all seems well in the galaxy, right? Well, they have one last trick up their sleeve, and now they challenge the group with one last fight against all 6. Yes, all 6, as Styrak and Branis are revived briefly during the final showdown. This fight can be rather chaotic, but in story mode, a lot of the mechanics are simplified to make the encounter manageable. Overall score 3. The second expansion, Shadow of Revan, brought 2 new operations at launch, the first of which is the Ravagers. The first boss, Sparky, has a junkyard dog feel with loads of adds and loads of pouncing. For the most part, things are pretty manageable. Overall score 1. Quartermaster Bulo serves as the second boss, along with a boatload of drunken pirates. Similar to Sparky, the adds are pretty manageable for the most part, but the amount of AoEs on the ground can be intimidating to newer groups. Overall score 2. Once aboard one of the pirate ships, the team faces off against Chief Engineer Torque, who provides a fast-paced EPS race to defeat him before he sabotages the ship out of the sky and takes the team with him. Most groups can defeat the Wookiee with one console destroyed, but newer players may have some trouble. Overall score 2. Master and Blaster, like the Warlords in S&V, are well known to wipe even experienced groups with their myriad AoEs, and kiting Master can be difficult, even for a tank. Add the fact Blaster has a last-ditch move, and this fight proves quite a bit of a challenge. Overall score 4. The last encounter is in 2 parts, and both halves of the fight have mechanics that can be difficult for new groups. Part 1 against Koritani and her pet can easily wipe players who kill them in the wrong order or fail to mitigate damage from the bird. Part 2 can have hapless DPS kill their friends accidentally if they're too trigger happy. Overall score 3. Temple of Sacrifice, the second Shadow Revan operation, is tied into the main story for that expansion. The first boss, Malafar the Savage, has a stack and savagery debuff that can mostly be ignored in story mode, and that turns it into a tank and spank encounter. Overall score 1. SWTOR Squadron is a step up in difficulty compared to the first boss, with one of the walkers unable to be taunted and the other requiring bombs to destroy its shield. It can be quite the challenge to inexperienced groups. Overall score 3. The Underlurker, like Torque, is a huge DPS race and healing check, with adds that dish out their loads of damage and a cross mechanic that is punishing if failed. The fight can lead to quite a few wipes. Overall score 3. Once entering the temple proper, the team must face off against the 3 Revenant commanders and their troops. This fight's a breather compared to the previous 2 bosses, but it can drag on for a while. Groups that can beat the walkers and Underlurkers should have little trouble. Overall score 2. In the deepest part of the temple, the team must fight the False Revan. While this is one of the most notorious fights in hard mode, story mode isn't too bad. There is a bit of a coordination check in the first 2 phases, and in addition, every dead player is revived at the start of phase 3. There is a final DPS check that can take a while for newer groups though. Overall score 3. After TOS, there were no new operations for nearly 3 years, with BioWare focusing on solo content for the next 2 expansions. Gods from the Machine was released 1 boss at a time over the course of a year, and the difficulty of these encounters is much harder than anything before it. To this day, few pug groups will dare enter Gods because of its difficulty. Tithe, the God of Rage, is an ad-heavy encounter, though for experienced groups the ads mechanics can mostly be ignored. As long as the stacks of Fury are managed well, the fight is doable in one go. Overall score 2. Ivella and Esne, the sisters, are the first encounter that requires use of a special action. In this case, players must toggle between red and blue to survive the sisters' onslaught of lasers and myriad other attacks. Overall score 3. Nahut, the Son of Shadow, is a lengthy encounter with multiple phases, each nothing like the one before it. The fight revolves around using the candle to even see the boss and has multiple DPS checks in the form of ads. Add the fact that Nahut needs to be guided around the outer edge of the arena for the second half of the fight, and this encounter can be a pain for everyone. Overall score 4. Skyva, the Mother of Sorrows, is a little easier than Nahut. Her fight is also in multiple phases, but many of the mechanics, such as the gravity floor, can be cheesed in story mode. If an ops team can defeat Nahut, they should have little trouble with Skyva. Overall score 3. Up until now, you may have noticed that most of the bosses covered in this video have been assigned a score of 3 or less, and only 3 bosses have been assigned a score of 4. There is a reason, because the last boss of this operation, Isaac the Destroyer, is arguably the hardest boss in the game. Even in story mode, this fight can take over 15 minutes, and there is little to no room for error. As of this video, I've only cleared this fight once, and it was with the guild run. It goes without saying, but to keep a tradition, overall score 5. The Nature of Progress, or Dxun as it's commonly called, is a little easier than the operation before it, but it's not a slouch either. The first boss, Pack Leader Red, requires careful positioning from the tank and also requires debuff management from the entire team. That being said, most groups can kill it before the 3rd flower. Overall score 3. The Security Center Breach is actually 2 encounters, but I combined them into 1 here. The first half is endless mounds of trash that the team must face before reaching the deep end of the beast dens. After the checkpoint, the team must fight their way inside, either through brute force and dodging electric coils, or having a stealth or sneak through the whole thing. Average overall score 2. The Mutant Trandoshan serve as the puzzle boss of the operation, requiring the team to kite all 4 bosses onto the train tracks in order to deliver a fatal blow to them. This fight can be a coordination nightmare, especially if one of them decides to heal it off of the tracks. Overall score 4. The Huntmaster is a little easier than the previous boss, and definitely easier than the arduous climb up the stairs if no one in your group unlocks the elevator. However, inexperienced groups can still easily wipe it if they fail the boss's mechanics. Overall score 2. The Apex Vanguard serves as the last boss, and depending on players' assigned roles, it can be a cakewalk or a multitasking nightmare. 80% of the fight in story mode is dependent on how well the battery runner does their job going from one station to the next. For everyone else, it is a tank and spank with some hiding from the main tank. Overall score 3. The newest operation as of this video is the follow-up to Dxun, the R-4 Anomaly, and its difficulty is comparable to that of Gods. The first boss, IPCPT, is a raid awareness check that can see many players be killed by the bombs or floor hazards. There is also a tight DPS check in the final phase. Overall score 4. Watchdog is a huge coordination check for players in that one person must protect another of the opposite color to prevent them from dying. Add in the same situational awareness as IPCPT and it results in a decent read challenge. Overall score, 3. Lord Canoff, like the Sisters or the Apex Vanguard, is another fight where players are equipped with special actions. In this case, the team must use trap bombs or fire probes to clear out the deadly Nyrock applied in the arena, all while dealing with the occasional out-of-room-wide AoE. Overall score, 3. The last boss is Lady Dominique, and she is absolutely brutal. As of this video, I have not defeated her, and her encounter requires as much player coordination and skill as Isaac's, only with arguably less time to kill. There is no room for error, and mistakes are easily punished. Overall score, 5. So that covers all of the operations, but there are still 5 other encounters that require a full ops group to complete. 3 of these can be fought year-round, but the other 2 are only available during special events. First up is Golden Fury, a droid on a keb built by one of the huts. This fight is mostly a tank and spank encounter with the occasional laser blast. Nothing too special. Overall score, 1. The Colossal Monolith on Zyos does a slow burn requiring player coordination to prevent from feeding off the roofs in the area. The boss has a lot of HP for a story mode fight, so high DPS numbers are essential. Overall score, 3. The mutated Gene Ocean Queen on Osis requires a little bit of coordination to manage adds and eggs. If DPS is high enough, most of the mechanics can be trivialized. Overall score, 2. Xenoanalyst 2 is a Gree droid that can only be fought during the Relics of the Gree event. It is a little more involved than most Lair bosses with multiple mini-phases and groups of adds. There is also a little bit of coordination required with the panels. Overall score, 2. The Eyeless is only available during the Rackle event and is primarily a tank and spank encounter with some Kaiden involved. Players will also need a vaccine purchase ahead of time to avoid being infected. Overall score, 1. And with that, I have now covered every operation boss in SWTOR. Looking over the content, it follows a progressive pattern of starting off simple and then getting more difficult over time. There are a few exceptions, such as EC being tougher than several ups that came after, and Gods of R-4 being as difficult as some of the easier hard modes. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.